Hello, and welcome back to the Life Burst Podcast, where I am going to show you kind of a cool deck that I created for one of the GP. This is part of the GP decks that didn't quite get there for me, Bruce. But I wanted to reveal my text to you guys. So this one is a Yuzuki Enter Denial deck. And I do say Enter Denial, right? It's not necessarily an Enter Burn deck, which I think most people lean into with Yuzuki. Most people lean into red, white, black, or red, black, blue. And I think that is also pretty correct to go down to. It gives you a better solid base for an aggro deck, which inevitably this also wants to be. But one of the things when you're playing aggro is that you deal damage, and that gives the opponent enter to work with. You're vanishing things on the field, and that gives opponents to work with. Kind of one of the things that kind of is annoying about red is that they don't have, like, you need to supplement bounce into the thing that you're doing to enter deny, and it really doesn't do it all that well outside of the assists, just because red wants you to be really mono red in order to pull the aggro thing off. And that's sort of where I came up with this idea. I also saw one or two decks similar to this in the Japanese meta, and I wanted to try it out too. So I'll talk about why I like it, and then I'll talk about why I didn't end up going with it to the GP. So just on this solid base, and the main deck is the main surprise here, but just this is a pretty solid base for an aggro deck in general, right? Especially if you're doing Enter Denial. So aside from Yuzuki, which has the plus side of being able to trash opponents' colored Enter, especially off-colored Enter, which can really mess with Esper decks. It also has just the ability to rip up just Enter in general. That's something that the Tamago deck I was lacking a little bit with X, and it kind of made me uncomfortable with, which is why I ended up going to Yuzuki. I found that the Yuzuki deck, that especially this one, has an incredibly positive matchup against Esper control decks. Like, really, really well. Like, doesn't matter what type of Esper control deck, doesn't matter what kind of center they're working with. This has got a very, very positive matchup. So if you're looking for a control killer, this might be your ticket. The thing is, though, it is a little awkward to play into other aggro decks and other mid-range decks, especially green decks, that can kind of just ignore what you're doing and keep going forward and mess with you. Again, the ability is that this gets 2 enter and then can get 2 enter out of your opponent's enter, burn them for 2, right? You use the 2 enter on either Go to the Top or a Entwined Supremacy, all of which are pretty good. But you've got bounce here in Akino Rock and Akino Bye Bye. Originally, I tested another white assist and even white Heaven as a choice here for Go to the Top, but I liked Entwined Supremacy too much to give up to it. It's aggro deck. I need to kind of go fast. Entwined Supremacy helps push that damage, so I ended up going with that. There was a world where I even did dash, like a sort of a dash version of this. Didn't work as well. So it's just Dash Hirana was doing it better, so I just thought, leave a Dash Hirana to leave Dash Hirana. And I ended up going Tamago, and this is from something I learned from actually Nova decks, is that the putting something on the bottom deck, again, is Enter Denial. But then the Tamago Jet Stick, being able to down something and draw 2 cards, is actually very strong in the aggro deck. I do need a little bit of refuel in terms of hands, so this gets me there. Go to the Top also kind of gets me there. There's not really a huge toolbox here, but it helps fix the weird main deck stuff later down. So you may be thinking, all right, this looks like a pretty standard Yuzuki deck. You've just decided to basically not play Machina Wing Smash and Machina Slash. Why are you saying this is an interesting deck at all? Well, it comes down to the main deck. So I'm going to just scroll down here and let you guys see that this is basically a mono-white aggro deck. And it is a mono-white aggro deck while simultaneously having a mono-red mode. It's very strange. So take it for what it is. It's weird, right? We've got a lot of cards that care about you being mono white. We got flash cards. We've got Over Pursuit. Then we have this card that cares you about being red, which is Diabride. So it's very strange. But when you look at the math, this is the most important part. You're running 4 multicolors. That's 8 multicolors in general at level 1. All right. Why does that matter? Okay, well, the first part is it's got 5,000 power, which actually means that it kind of resists some other aggro decks, which is kind of nice. Again, this pops level 3s, 3,000 back into hands, and there's a lot of mono white decks running around with flashcards, and a lot of red decks that were using Ramel at the time, or Harrah's, right? Harrah's definitely still get rid of this. And so this is actually pretty okay in terms of what it does. It's not quite, Yuzuki or something that I would have put in my mono white deck, but it does the job of avoiding some amount of damage. But more importantly, it lets you hit certain numbers, right? So with 4 Lancelot, 4 or 4, this is 12, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. 16 is the bare minimum you can use to get away with this. You have enter 1 that's red here, enter 2 that's red here, and then when you go for the kill, eventually you'll need a 3rd enter. You'll get it, though, because again, you'll be able to probably Tamago Jet Stick on turn 2 to get yourself the 2 red eventually that you'll need to go off on here. But it is a little dicey. You have to prioritize your red enter specifically for this. It is doable, though. I have found that it's extremely doable because the deck has been made specifically so that way you can you won't need red enter after a certain point. You mostly use white stuff after that. Now the deck runs a ton of white. Just so much white here. I suppose if you really wanted to be a little bit more red heavy, you could take out these 2 pen lights and replace them with some kind of red card if you'd like. Or you could take out this Lynx and replace it with 2 red cards if you like. But I really, really appreciate the bounce here. And you'll see that this is actually secretly just a mono red deck. So instead of using the card that vanishes Celebre when on this life burst, it's using Lapis instead. Right? Instead of using the card that vanishes on life burst here, the level 2, this also does the same thing, but it bounces, right? So both of these just are bounce versions of that. Next, you have your level 1s just being a lot of these, plus some Yukis. Yukis are just good in general. You should always be running a few if you're running mono white, or just any white deck. Level 2s ups the power a little bit. You've got Lancelots, you've got flashcards. These are just great ways to more or less open more lanes along with plenty of over pursuits. I actually genuinely like the fact that it's very easy to enter charge with over pursuit, meaning that, yeah, you could actually use this to also help yourself grow at some point, because, sometimes you got to roll that dice to see if you can hit the next grow. And then to top it off, we have a really, really, really strong level 3s. We have Diabride, we have Penlight, and we have Remember. You'll notice all of these tax. Every single one of them basically taxes. Diabride's enter burn, but it's tax. It also lets you look for more stuff. It gives you a level of filtering that you don't normally have in these types of decks. And it also just taxes, right? Remember is one of the best cards that you can do. Tiffany played mono white in the GP, and she kept saying that basically every single matchup was play as many Remembers as you can after turn 3. And then Penlight, also very good, taxing the opponent. Probably won't have the enter to work with it, So, and if I was to say that you were going to replace anything, I guess, if you wanted more red, you probably could use Morax. Morax is the level 2 that enter charges you if you've enter burned the opponent this turn, which you always do with your center Elrig, and has a tax, otherwise vanish effect. I still like the bounce a little bit here. So here, let me just real quick give you a tip with Diabride, right? So Diabride says, when a red Signy on your field becomes a target of an opponent's ability or effect, the opponent chooses 1 card from their enter and puts it into the trash. Now, Diabride is sort of the turn that you decide that you're going to put out Diabride and be annoying about it. That's sort of the same turn that you're putting out any of these 12 cards. You can fill out the lanes there, but often you don't necessarily need to fill out the lanes. Often it's okay to basically have one other red card in an open lane, put Diabride in the other open lane, and then usually sometimes can't get that 3rd open lane. And in that scenario, you just put Diabride and the other red card in the open lane, and you just put a white card in the non-open lane. And it will do the same job for you. Diabride is kind of sneakily powerful in this deck because you are controlled as... It seems weird, but you have control over what the opponent's going to target, more or less. by always putting them into terrible situations with the open lanes, so you can kind of control when they're going to enter burn. So it's pretty good there. Inevitably, it also kind of helps you with the taxing, right? Because if you're burning them out, then you put out remembers and pen lights. They can't really pay for taxes anymore. So I like the deck a lot. One of the main reasons why I didn't play this in the GP is because it was very light on red. It wasn't like I couldn't get it to work. It was just a struggle, and it was something that I just didn't want to deal with at the GP. I didn't want my deck fighting with me at any point in time, and that was the main reason I didn't go with Dash either. Now, Dash is still very powerful and can definitely win you a ton of games. It can win you a whole tournament, but you need to know how to play it, and you got to actively fight it a little bit. So I didn't want to do that. I just didn't want to do it. So I inevitably, that's my reasoning. I still think this is a very strong deck, and probably the best Yuzuki deck that I've honestly ever made and played against right now. So I think if you like Yuzuki, this is actually a pretty good choice to go for. It's a wacky deck for sure. No one will expect it coming when they see your Yuzuki kick out there, and then you're just basically playing mono white aggro. It ends up being very strong, and you watch your opponent be like, huh, I don't have any enter ever, do I? And this really is what it does. It cleans up nicely. Basically, more or less says the only enter that the opponent's going to get is going to be the damage you deal with them, and that's about it. So I hope you guys like the deck. Let me know if you think this wacky brew is too wacky, or if you have any critiques.